At the beginning of the story, the main character, Remo, shares that these days, adventurers and monsters all use magical clones to fight. Injury-free dungeon raids have become very common, and videos of these battles are being live-streamed across the continent. Currently, being an adventurer, a demon, or even a hero in the Demon King's army is just considered a profession. The scene shifts to the 4th floor of the Demon King's castle, where Remy and his party are fighting monsters. Outside the dungeon, streamers are broadcasting the entire fight. A boy named Alvar swings his sword, slashing a beast to pieces. Remy is amazed to see Alvar's magic sword erupt with power, taking down at least 10 werewolves with a single slash. The party also shares that Alvar's skill is difficult to use because he becomes vulnerable until it's activated. However, the Holy Knight, Luck, covered for Alvar, providing excellent support. The commentators remark that while each member of the team is very strong, coordination is still essential for dungeon raids. Although Luck possesses the offensive power of a warrior and calm decision-making when protecting his teammates, it makes him an incredibly effective shield. Remy's close friend, Phoenix, steps forward and asks the girl and Alvar if he can trust them to hold the front line while he attacks. Alvar agrees, and the girl, named Lily, says that Phoenix can go on ahead. Lily charges in to attack the pack of werewolves, and the commentators announce that a lightning-speed attack is coming. They mention that there are only 3 confirmed people in the world who can use this skill, and that they are witnessing supersonic archery. The speed is so fast that the naked eye can't keep up. But when they see all the enemies fall to her arrows, they clearly realize its terrifying power. In the blink of an eye, 8 werewolves were taken down simultaneously. Meanwhile, Phoenix calmly walks toward the floor boss, guarding the door to the next level, as if everything around him is just an illusion. However, dozens of other werewolves are still swarming around, and the entire team must attack fiercely to stop them from getting near Phoenix at all costs. While Remy is analyzing the situation, he is suddenly attacked by a wolf. Alvar saves him and yells, telling Rem not to just stand there like a statue. He even jokes about whether Remy's dark magic specializes in standing still. Ironically, Alvar himself is then attacked by another wolf. Luckily, his mother, Lily, saves her son in time, and reminds him to focus on the fight, as there are still many enemies around. Alvar replies, "Yeah," but seems annoyed that Remy isn't doing anything. Remy feels tense, not knowing how to react, but he quickly focuses on Phoenix, who is about to attack. The commentators continue their play-by-play as Phoenix reaches the floor boss. They note that this boss wolf is much larger than a regular werewolf, perhaps 3 times the size, and radiates a terrifying power. However, despite facing the giant boss, Phoenix doesn't flinch at all. He bows his head and apologizes to the boss wolf and shouts that they need to get through. The boss wolf angrily throws a punch at Phoenix, but he easily blocks it with his sword. Remy is astonished by the incredible power of the impact. Suddenly, flames begin to engulf the boss wolf's body, setting it ablaze. The commentators are initially confused about what's happening, but quickly realize that the flames are burning the wolf's body, causing intense pain. The boss wolf struggles with all its might but can't escape. Phoenix immediately leaps up and delivers a powerful slash. In just a few seconds, the boss was defeated. Phoenix shouts that their battles will always end in victory. The commentators announce that the fight is over, and the fire hero, Phoenix, has once again defeated the floor boss with a single blow. They also explain that a holy sword's power depends on the spirit dwelling within it. Phoenix commands a fire spirit, known as the source of all heat in the world, which indicates it's a spirit of the highest tier. The commentators also stress that the criteria for choosing a wielder for this spirit are extremely strict. That's why Phoenix is the first person to form a contract with it in 130 years. As the party proceeds to the next floor and finds a safe room, it seems the raid is nearly over. At this point, the commentators ask the audience if they want to wait for the next raid. They focus on Remy and comment that as a dark mage, a role suited for support, Remy isn't a member that parties would prioritize recruiting in the current meta. In fact, the team wouldn't have much trouble even without Remy. They suggest that if Remy were replaced by a light mage, the team's offensive capabilities would improve significantly. The audience also agrees that this comment is true, since Rem hasn't done anything at all during the fight. Hearing this, Remy feels hurt that it's once again being suggested he be replaced by a light mage. The difference between dark mages and light mages lies in their magical properties. Dark magic primarily focuses on offensive spells and damage-dealing skills, while light magic includes healing, buffing, and purifying spells. very useful for healing and supporting teammates. Remy explains that dark magic often includes skills like slowing enemies and reducing their attack and defense power, causing mental confusion, inflicting poison status effects, and creating blinding darkness. Therefore, both dark and light magic are different from normal offensive and defensive spells, and their effects are often hard to see with the naked eye. Many people believe dark magic is overlooked because it's considered simplistic. While light magic is easily recognized through healing, restoration, and buffs, dark magic targets the enemy, making it difficult for even his own teammates to perceive its benefits. Remy shared that ever since dungeon raids became a form of entertainment, he's found it all the more interesting. In battle, he could reduce the magical and physical power, speed, cognitive ability, and even restrict the vision of all enemies. However, these effects were never highlighted on the live streams, making it look to viewers as if he was just standing still. Remy also mentioned that even when he did cast spells, he would often receive countless negative and strange comments from the audience. Thanks to the raid logstone, they could continue from the last checkpoint they reached, even though the party had yet to face the Demon King in the deepest part of the castle. It was now time for Remy's team to enter the 5th floor of the dungeon. Remy explained that of all the dungeons in the world, the legendary Demon King's castle remained unconquered, with no team ever having cleared its final floor. Remy stated that his team consisted of Alvar the Warrior, Luck the Holy Knight, Lily the Hunter, Remy the Dark Mage, and finally their leader and the fire hero, Phoenix. Remy shared that among the tens of thousands of official expedition teams, their party was ranked 4th. This ranking was determined by the Explorers Association based on popularity and achievements, and was updated once a year. Remy also mentioned that many viewers still wondered why a team like theirs even needed him. Their party had 5 members, and Phoenix, the fire hero, was the first person to form a pact with the fire spirit in 130 years. Everyone placed their hopes in Phoenix to finally end the legend of the impregnable Demon King's castle. Phoenix was also Remy's childhood friend, but the gap between a hero like Phoenix and a simple, unpopular dark mage like Remy was what cost him his job that day. Let's see what happened before Remy left the party. Alvar yelled at Remy, calling him dead weight and nothing more. He furiously asked if he was supposed to think otherwise. Phoenix tried to intervene and stop Alvar from going too far, but Alvar snapped and told Phoenix to stop defending Remy. He pointed out that he, Luck, and Lily had all proven their worth to join the party, but what about Remy? Alvar argued that Remy was just Phoenix's childhood friend, taking up a valuable spot on the team. He added that if it weren't for Phoenix, no one would let a boring dark mage join their party. Remy tried to laugh it off to ease the tension, but this only enraged Alvar more, who screamed that there was nothing funny about it. Alvar told Remy to face reality and stop leeching off of Phoenix. Hearing this, Phoenix got angry, demanding that Alvar apologize to Remy for being so disrespectful, insisting that Remy wasn't as weak as Alvar thought. Alvar retorted that he disagreed. He then turned to Luck and Lily to ask for their opinions, stressing that it wasn't their job to babysit Remy, was it? Luck replied that he didn't really care whether Remy was on the team or not, and that was just how he felt. Alvar immediately asked if that meant Luck wanted Remy to leave so they could find someone more suitable. Luck responded that if they found someone who contributed more, things would probably be easier. Alvar went on to ask Remy if he understood how annoying his way of talking was. Then he turned to Lily and asked what she thought about Remy. Lily answered that she didn't think Phoenix used his personal feelings to justify adding a physically weak member. However, she also admitted that the effects of dark magic weren't immediately obvious. Furthermore, the team's strategy was to blitz through raids with high attack power. So instead of support, Lily preferred more direct offensive power. Phoenix grew tense, but Alvar just smiled and told Phoenix to see what everyone really thought. Alvar approached Remy, claiming he wasn't saying these things because he hated him. Remy felt increasingly uncomfortable and was shocked when Alvar demanded he cast his dark magic on him right there to prove its power. Alvar declared that if Remy's dark magic was truly powerful, he would sincerely apologize. Remy hesitated, recalling a time in his childhood when his master took Phoenix as a student and warned Remy not to complain about it. The master had threatened to stop teaching him if he heard one more complaint. Remy then made Phoenix promise to keep it a secret forever. But Phoenix became furious and yelled at Alvar that if he said anything else to Remy, there would be consequences. To Phoenix's astonishment, Remy said that he understood and was willing to leave the party. Alvar laughed loudly, delighted that Remy finally agreed to leave. He turned to Phoenix and asked if he understood now that Remy was just a coward. And having someone like Remy on the 4th-ranked team in the world is just a joke. After that, Alvar publicly announced that their dark mage would be leaving the team and asked who would replace him. Meanwhile, deep down, Remy wondered how many times this had happened before, and whether it was because he was a dark mage or because Alvar had instigated it. Remy shared that adventurers exist simultaneously within a pragmatic system and the entertainment industry. If someone isn't strong, they can't raid dungeons, but if they're not appealing, the audience won't care about them either. The audience, other adventurers, and even their own teammates will isolate people like that. Remy asserted that the life he had aimed for wasn't a place where he would be humiliated just for not being able to complete a mission with everyone else. Remy realized he had no other choice but to change himself. Phoenix tried to stop him, but Remy just smiled and said it was okay because he would surpass them all with another team. Alvar burst out laughing and mocked him, saying no team would ever want someone like Remy. At that moment, with a heavy heart, Remy decided that even though he and Phoenix had been friends since childhood, from now on, they would be rivals. After leaving that place, Remy sat in front of a house, thinking that this was just the same old complaint as always. He always had to suffer in silence because if he explained it to his teammates, his master's secret would be revealed, something he absolutely did not want. Remy also shared that Phoenix had kept his promise to him from their childhood, even now. But because of that, every time Phoenix defended him, Remy felt guilty, fearing that the team's trust in Phoenix would waver. Remy wondered even though he had talked about joining another party. The reality was that only heroes could form parties. And he, just a dark mage, had been accepted into Phoenix's party by chance for reasons he didn't even know. He wondered who would be willing to take him in after he left Phoenix. Suddenly, Remy heard someone shout that they didn't want that. When Remy turned to look, he was surprised to see someone yelling at a girl. Looking closer, he was shocked to realize she was a demi-human girl. A little boy standing next to her comforted her, telling her not to be sad and that their uncle must have eaten somewhere else. The boy encouraged her, saying her shop would get all sorts of customers late at night, and she just had to try again tomorrow. When he got there, Remy asked the little girl if the shop was still open, because he was feeling hungry. Both the boy and the girl were surprised to see Remy and confirmed that the shop was indeed still open. Remy praised the little girl for helping out at the shop and asked if she had anything she would recommend for him to eat. The little girl hesitated, then looked at some apples. Remy then asked if those were apples and if so, he'd take one. When Remy picked up an apple from the basket, the girl stammered that the one he chose looked a bit strange, but its color was beautiful, so it must be delicious. She also added that the apple looked pitiful because no one wanted to buy it. She had tried her best to convince everyone it was delicious, but they all refused. So if Remy didn't want it either, she wouldn't force him to eat it. But to her surprise, Remy took a bite of the apple and said it was just as delicious as she had said. The little girl looked at him with a puzzled expression and asked if he was telling the truth. Remy nodded, adding that she shouldn't judge by appearances alone, but also by taste. He praised her as a great salesperson. Then Remy asked if he could come back to buy something again, and asked her to give him more recommendations. Hearing that, the little girl was moved to tears and replied with a heartfelt yes, thanking him from the bottom of her heart. The boy standing next to her congratulated her on finally getting her first customer. He also thanked Remy for coming, but Remy said he was the one who should be thanking them. He apologized for bothering them at night. Remy noticed the girl was hiding behind the boy, which he found a bit confusing. The boy explained that she was just being shy. Remy smiled, said goodbye, and started to leave. But suddenly the little girl ran out and shouted that her name was Cashew. Remy chuckled and introduced himself as well. Cashew thanked him and said she would eagerly wait for him to come back, whether it was tomorrow or the day after, and that she would wait for him for as long as it took. Remy was taken aback when he heard those words. After saying goodbye, he told himself that even someone like him wanted to be needed by someone. He thought about his conversation with Cashew and wondered if he had acted too emotionally. But then he told himself that if a little girl like her was trying so hard, then he had to give it his all too. Remy recalled his master once saying that it would be a long and arduous battle. Remy's master had emphasized that if he didn't conquer the peak, no one would recognize his worth. Remy was certain that somewhere out there, someone would need him. The scene changes to another place, where a girl was looking at a picture of Remy and softly whispering his name. Then time fast forwards a few weeks later, as Remy wondered how many weeks had passed since he started looking for a new party. Every time he approached a party to join, some would say there were no open spots, while others would mock him for getting kicked out of his old one. Some parties were even willing to accept him, but after learning he was a dark mage, they would start to hesitate. Remembering how he had yelled at Alvar that he would surpass them with another party, Remy felt incredibly frustrated. He had said those words, but until now, he hadn't been accepted into any party. Finally, Remy decided to use a party-matching service provided by a branch of the Adventurers Guild. He remarked that the service fee was quite expensive, but at least it helped him stay afloat. But when he searched for quests, he was shocked to find there were no missions available for a dark mage. Feeling down, Remy decided to go get something to eat first to lift his spirits. The scene shifts to Cashew's shop, where the man beside the little girl, Blitz, remarked that he understood being a dark mage must be very difficult for Remy. Remy replied that it wasn't really like that. He still saw urgent recruitment notices for dark mages from time to time. Blitz then asked if Remy could use anything other than dark magic. Remy explained that it wasn't that he couldn't use other skills, but the ones he wasn't gifted in were ineffective. Also, adventurer registration only allows you to take on jobs you have an aptitude for. Seeing Remy looking sad, Cashew loudly said that she also thought dark mages were cool. Remy smiled and replied that he was happy she said that, but joked that's why she was the cute poster girl instead of a boring male shopkeeper to attract generous customers. Blitz said that wasn't true, making Cashew blush. Remy shared that Cashew was only 8 years old and not only helped out, but also did her best to support her family financially, however little. She had gotten permission to work, and Remy also mentioned he was Cashew's first customer. He said that he often stopped by the shop precisely because he wanted Cashew to keep encouraging him. Remy admitted he hadn't seen Blitz in a long time, but Blitz was always worried about him. Blitz then said he understood Remy's situation because he also wanted to be a tailor. But no matter how much he practiced, he couldn't compare to those who officially had that profession. Remy shared that in his hometown, children learn their profession when they turn 10 at the temple, like receiving a prophecy guiding them to a suitable job. Whether it was being an adventurer or having a daily life-related job like a cook, blacksmith, or merchant, everyone had to accept it, as it was considered a gift from the gods. If someone got the job they wanted, it was a blessing. If not, it was a trial. Remy confessed that for someone like him, who dreamed of being a hero, it truly made him feel hopeless. He told Blitz that if his efforts had truly been worth anything, he would have gotten that job. When a customer entered the shop and Cashew deftly handled it, Remy smiled and asked Blitz if they could just keep trying with what they were able to do. Blitz replied that they could and said that even if things didn't go smoothly, he wouldn't mind if Remy worked with Cashew at the shop. Remy laughed and thanked him. Suddenly, they heard someone cry out in pain. When Remy turned to look, he saw a thief snatch a bag from a girl's hands and rush toward them. Remy quickly told Blitz to block the thief's path. Blitz, confused, asked if Remy was planning to do something. Remy said yes, and reassured Blitz that he would only provide support and wouldn't let him get hurt. Blitz agreed, stood in front of the thief, and asked Remy to watch over Cashew. Remy told Cashew to hide as he watched the situation unfold. He started thinking about the magic permitted for use in daily life. Remy knew that if he used magic beyond that limit, he could be monitored. Therefore, in this case, he had to use Blitz to stop the thief. The thief angrily yelled at Blitz, asking what he was doing in his way, as if he had a death wish. Remy focused on identifying the thief as the target to be subdued. Everyone watched nervously as the event unfolded. No one knew what would happen next, and even Blitz was a little worried. The thief leaped toward Blitz with a knife in his hand, but suddenly he was stuck, suspended in midair. He was confused, not understanding what was happening, unable to move or see anything, and he began to struggle for breath. Blitz seized the opportunity, grabbed his arm, and landed a punch to his face, knocking him out on the spot. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief, seeing justice served. Suddenly, Remy started shouting, praising Blitz for so easily defeating a knife-wielding assailant. Meanwhile, Cashew was still hiding, and Remy gently approached from behind, whispering in her ear. Startled and confused, Cashew replied with a yes. Remy then asked her to do something. The woman whose bag was stolen thanked Blitz for saving her belongings. Blitz humbly replied that it was just something any citizen should do. In the midst of this, Cashew excitedly shouted that the shopkeepers were so cool. Hearing that, the woman asked if Blitz was the owner of the shop, and she showed her gratitude by buying some fruit. Blitz thanked her for her purchase. Seeing this, other people also started coming over to buy fruit to show their appreciation for Blitz's brave act. Watching the crowd rush over, Rema felt relieved. He knew that by helping Blitz do a good deed, people would want to give something back to him, especially now that Blitz was seen as a hero who had stopped a crime. Blitz happily gave Remy a thumbs up to thank him for his help. Remy watched as the thief was led away, as he no longer had the strength to walk on his own. Remy thought to himself that, although he had used dark magic, it wasn't something he could have easily used against a knife wielder. As an apology for letting Blitz take down the criminal for him, Remy thought it would be nice if he could contribute a little to Blitz's story. Afterward, Remy wondered if he was losing his skills. Even though he had left the squad, he had continued his training as he'd promised his master. Remy shared that even though he knew his assigned job, he couldn't give up on his dream of being a hero and had tried his hardest in front of his master. Looking back, he realized it had been a special training regimen, as harsh as hell. Remy recalled being left alone on mountains among beasts, forced to climb back up after being pushed off cliffs, and being beaten to a pulp by his master. Through relentless training sessions, Remy had experienced his own limits by casting dark magic on himself. He learned that his physical strength would gradually weaken with overuse of magic, and his vision would also begin to blur over time. Remy had even trained his body to memorize subtle adjustments, and as long as he wasn't interrupted, he never failed when using his magic. He also mentioned that he had taken measures so that passers-by wouldn't notice he was using dark magic, while also concealing his identity as a former member of the world's 4th-ranked squad. Although the chances of being recognized were very low, he was still careful not to leave any clues. Lost in thought, a girl approached him and said she had been watching him. Remy was confused, wondering if the girl had really been paying attention to him the whole time. The girl introduced herself as Mira and praised him, saying she thought Remy was truly extraordinary. Besides his perfect magic control, she was also fascinated by how he optimized and deployed multiple types of dark magic in just a few seconds. Hearing those words, Remy became tense, realizing that everything he had just done had been completely exposed. He wondered who this woman really was. Mira smiled and confessed that she was a huge fan of his. Remy was stunned, unable to believe his ears, thinking this had to be some kind of joke. He could understand if Phoenix had fans, but for someone like Mira to be his fan was simply unthinkable. Mira insisted that she never thought she'd be able to witness Remy's dark arts with her own eyes. She revealed that she had intentionally slowed her pace while following him, and had almost lost sight of him. Suddenly, Remy noticed something nearby that looked like a bat-shaped antenna, and he wondered if Mira might be a vampire. Mira then asked Remy if he liked demi-humans. Remy replied with a simple no, feeling confused by her question. All of a sudden, Mira grabbed his hand tightly and exclaimed that his dark arts were truly magnificent. She added that while it might sound a bit unsettling, she had been searching for him ever since he left Phoenix's party. Mira couldn't help but think that Phoenix's party kicking Remy out was a foolish mistake. She was about to say more, but Remy hesitantly reminded her that she was standing a little too close. Embarrassed, Mira let go of his hand and stepped back, apologizing that she had just gotten too close in her excitement, as she had always wanted to meet a gentleman like Remy. Suddenly, Mira turned and ran, shouting as she went for him not to hate her, just because she was being so emotional. At that moment, Remy thought about how he'd only ever faced harsh criticism, so for a beautiful girl like Mira to suddenly declare herself his fan was completely unexpected. On top of that, she had held his hand and smelled wonderful. Remy called out after Mira, saying there was no way he could ever hate her. Not at all. He confessed that everything had happened so suddenly that he hadn't even had a chance to ask for her name. Mira praised Remy for being such a kind person, and asked if he had changed at all since before. Confused, Remy asked if they had met somewhere before, since she didn't look like an adventurer. He also wondered about the fact that there were almost no demi-humans among adventurers except for elves, especially if she was a vampire. Still, Remy couldn't recall where he might have met Mira and decided to drop it. Mira then introduced herself and apologized for her forwardness. She invited Remy for some tea as a way to make up for it, though she admitted the invitation was rather sudden. Mira explained that since he was the 4th-ranked adventurer in the world, she would probably never get another chance to be with him, as long as he agreed. Remy was flustered, not knowing what to do. Seeing how tense he was, Mira asked if something was wrong. Remy hesitantly replied that everything was fine. Afterward, he thought to himself, wondering who could possibly refuse such an appealing invitation. In any case, Mira was still very close to him, which was understandable since she was so beautiful. Completely different from someone like him. Suddenly, Mira spoke up again, mentioning that their conversation had gotten sidetracked, and she hadn't gotten to say that he was the ultimate dark mage. Remy immediately protested, saying that wasn't true. Mira urged him not to be so modest, pointing out that among the top 100 parties in the world, there were only 3 dark mages, and he was one of them. She stressed that the role of a dark mage in adventuring is completely different from other jobs because it isn't flashy. However, the reason Phoenix's party achieved so much was entirely thanks to Remy's contributions, something no ordinary dark mage could have accomplished. Mira asserted that Remy's precise control over his magic came from a deep understanding of every minute detail of his spell's effects. She continued, expressing her belief that Remy must have put in an extraordinary amount of effort, far beyond what ordinary people could even imagine. Remy couldn't help but recall the harsh words from his former teammates, who had cursed him and called him useless. He told Mira that this was the first time since becoming an adventurer that he had ever heard such kind words. He wondered how Mira, who claimed to be his fan, knew so much about him. Suddenly, Mira burst out in frustration, saying that the only reason Phoenix could take down the floor boss in a single blow was because of Remy's power, which had weakened all the enemies beforehand. She couldn't understand why humans would look down on a high-class dark mage like him. Mira angrily called the human race fools for their actions. Remy tensely asked Mira what was going on. Startled, Mira returned to her normal self and apologized, saying it was just something a friend of hers used to say. Then she let out a laugh, breaking the tense atmosphere. Remy took this opportunity to ask Mira to pass on his thanks to her friends for supporting him. Mira nodded, saying she had already relayed his thanks to them. Remy was confused, not understanding what she was talking about. Suddenly, Mira apologized for making him wait, and pointed to the place where she wanted to take him for tea. Remy was stunned when he realized it was none other than the Demon King's castle. Mira apologized if the castle made Remy feel tense. Confused, Remy asked Mira who she really was. Mira replied that they had known about his true power for a long time, but seeing it with her own eyes had solidified her belief. She also shared her belief that Remy was someone who deserved to be respected in a proper position. Mira earnestly pleaded with him to lend them his strength by any means necessary. The scene then shifts to inside the castle, where Mira reports to someone that she has brought the dark mage, Remy. A girl entered, joyfully sharing how happy she was that Carmilla had returned. Hearing that name, Remy immediately remembered Carmilla, the boss of the 3rd floor of the Demon King's castle, often called Dungeon Carmilla. Remy recalled that Carmilla seemed to suck her enemy's blood through her swarm of bats, but in reality she used magic to attack. She was cruel and enjoyed torturing others just for fun. A truly wicked being, yet nothing like the Mira he'd met. A strange voice asked if he was Remy. Remy replied, yes, while starting to wonder about the Demon King's castle, a 10-floor dungeon where the ruler of the demons would never appear until someone reached the deepest floor. He thought about how no one had managed that so far, and if he were to advance, he would be the first adventurer to meet the leader of the Demon King's castle. As he listened to the girl's voice, Remy felt her voice was a bit childish. Suddenly, the girl revealed that she was Lucy, the ruler of the Demon King's castle and the leader of the demons. Upon seeing Lucy, Remy froze, unable to take his eyes off her. Lucy noticed his expression and asked if something was wrong or if there was something strange about her. Remy replied, simply stating that Lucy looked much younger than he had ever imagined. Lucy angrily asked if he was implying that she didn't look like a leader of demons. Remy tensely replied that since he didn't know who the leader of the demons was, he wouldn't dare to make any such comment. Lucy, surprised by his cautiousness, said that if he were a rude person like so many others, she would have thrown him out of the castle long ago. However, she could see that he was different. Lucy suddenly shouted that was enough with the introductions, and they should get straight to the main point. She suddenly declared that she was appointing Remy as the staff officer for the Demon King's castle. Hearing this, Remy was stunned and wondered if this meant he would become the second in command of the Demon King's army. He also wondered if such a role was really suitable for a human. Seeing his expression, Lucy remarked that he looked as if this was the first time he was hearing about this. She turned to Carmilla and asked, "You told him about this already, right?" Carmilla sincerely apologized and explained that she thought bringing Reme directly to the Demon King's castle would be quicker than explaining beforehand. Hearing this, Lucy grew angry and asked Reme if he was just following Carmilla without knowing what was going on. She continued to mock him, asking if he thought he'd get a chance to touch her chest just because Carmilla said she was his fan. Reme was stunned by Lucy's words and quickly denied that was what he was thinking. Lucy asked again, this time with a look of disbelief, if Reme truly didn't want to touch Carmilla's chest, and if so, whether he was even a normal young man. She was about to say more about Carmilla's chest, but when Carmilla shot her an angry glare, Lucy tensed up and immediately fell silent. Then, Lucy admitted they had gotten off topic and said they should return to the main issue. Reme, stressed, thought to himself that Lucy was the one who had derailed the conversation. Lucy continued, stating that appointing Reme as a staff officer was Carmilla's wish. Surprised, Reme asked for confirmation, and Lucy affirmed that it was true. Although she hadn't paid close attention, his abilities had caught their interest. Unexpectedly, Lucy asked Reme which demon leader had trained him. Reme hesitated, wondering if she was asking about his master or some other mentor among the demons. Lucy insisted that there was no way Reme could have reached his current level on his own, as he was on par with dark mages who had trained rigorously for 100 years or more. Even though he concealed it well, his abilities far surpassed those of an ordinary human. Lucy snapped, demanding that Reme answer immediately. But he remained silent, his face tense. Lucy continued, explaining that she understood why he called it dark magic. Initially, degenerative incantations were known as black magic, because their users often spread terror among humankind. Back then, the ruler of the demons was seen as a threat, completely different from heroes, who were considered allies of humanity. Each nation also had different ways of assessing these entities with varying levels of caution. Lucy asked Reme if he realized how complicated things would become if his true identity were discovered, and whether he was a praiseworthy student who always remained loyal to his master. Remo, tense, apologized. Lucy replied that there was no need to apologize. She understood his situation. She went on to ask if Reme's master had the same hair color, eye color, and horns as she did. Reme remained silent, which only frustrated Lucy more. Lucy told Reme that she had taken over the Demon Lord's castle as the current ruler of the demons. She asked for his opinion on a grandfather who left his own granddaughter behind in the Demon Lord's castle to retire. Hearing the word grandfather, Reme was shocked, wondering if it was possible that Lucy was his master's granddaughter. Lucy, frustrated, demanded to know why both her grandfather and that man had abandoned the Demon Lord's throne without realizing its value. She said it was deplorable, but she felt lucky to have found a relative in this situation. Hearing this, Reme clearly realized that his master was Lucy's grandfather, the previous Demon Lord. Lucy remarked that it was surprising a human had been educated by her grandfather and that Carmilla's eyes had not been mistaken. Carmilla admitted that she also hadn't expected Reme to be so exceptional. Hearing the word educated, Rem wondered if Lucy and Carmilla were referring to his master's training. Lucy said that she had initially planned to test his abilities, but now she saw no need. She invited Reme to become her staff officer and help the Demon Lord's castle prosper. Reme quickly asked them to hold on a moment, thinking to himself that he had come this far but had never imagined he would end up on the side opposing the heroes. Suddenly, Carmilla interrupted, saying she wouldn't force him, but she would be very happy to work with him. Carmilla asked why, despite knowing he was a dark mage, Reme still chose to become an adventurer when it was clearly such a difficult path. Reme replied that he longed to be a hero. It was his childhood dream, and he apologized for saying it. Lucy replied that she didn't mind. Carmilla asked that if that was a common story for human children, why did he want to be a hero? Was it to look cool? Or to be seen as a hero by defeating monsters in front of others? Reme admitted that was it. He wanted to fight personally, strike down enemies, show off his brilliant swordsmanship, and unleash fire or ice magic. Carmilla then asked about honor and governance. Reme replied that he used to imagine being recognized and praised by people on the street. He dreamed of tense battles in dungeons, where his hands would sweat and every fight felt fulfilling and thrilling. That was his childhood dream. An ideal future full of good things, all to his benefit. Carmilla then asked Remy what he thought a true hero was. Remy was flustered by the question. Carmilla said that while Remy was the ultimate dark mage, that wasn't the only reason she respected him. She admired how he helped others without asking for anything in return, even giving them the credit. In her opinion, a person who acts for the sake of justice rather than honor is the one truly worthy of being called a hero. She concluded that a job only reflects a person's attitude. It doesn't completely define who they are, and this was also true for heroes. Carmilla asked Remy again if he still yearned to be a hero. She wondered if that could only be achieved by being an adventurer, because adventurers raid dungeons and fight monsters. Remy mused that originally the role of monsters was filled by demi-humans like elves. However, adventurers were mostly human. Therefore, the desire to become a hero had never faded in him, and he had never thought of giving up. He asked if anything would change if he became a monster. Carmilla replied that, unlike adventurers, monsters often conceal their true forms. Therefore, he would have no honor or recognition, and might become very different from the image of the hero he had once envisioned. But Carmilla added that, although she didn't know his circumstances, she knew he didn't want to reveal his powers. However, if he became a monster, he could unleash his power as he wished, and no one in the Demon Lord's castle would be bothered or concerned about his true abilities. Remy nervously asked if a dark mage like him could become a monster in the Demon Lord's army. Carmilla confirmed that he could. This was different from easily visible powers, as the effects of dark magic were never fully understood by onlookers. She explained that every monster he had faced knew that Remy's existence had led to their defeat, and they all recognized the power and threat he posed to their forces. Therefore, if Remy became an ally, he would be the most potent ally in this world, stronger and more valuable than anyone else. Carmilla concluded that just as people were inspired and energized by the efforts of adventurers, demi-humans and monsters also needed a symbol to rally around and look up to. According to Carmilla, this aspiration might be different from becoming a hero, but she never wanted to become a monster just to be hunted like prey. Remy thought to himself that if he could defeat the heroes in the Demon Lord's castle, considered the greatest challenge, and push them back, he would find a new meaning for his power. They could become a beacon of hope for demi-humans who were hesitant to become monsters. They could become an entity strong enough to compete with adventurers, just like Remy's own aspiration to become a hero. Remy asked Carmilla if he could add a comment that monsters and adventurers were equal entities. If either side was lacking, dungeon raids couldn't exist. Moreover, audiences were only drawn to the battles because of the existence of powerful monsters. Remy added that he had never seen them as mere prey. Carmilla responded with a yes, saying that it was precisely this perspective of Remy's that made her feel the need to approach him. She emphasized that Remy was truly both a kind and strong person. Then, she cheerfully asked if he would be willing to become their hero. Remy replied with certainty that he would. Lucy smiled and remarked that it seemed they had reached an agreement. She officially appointed Remy, the Dark Mage, as the staff officer of the Demon King's castle. And so, on that day, Remy found a new job after being expelled from the world's 4th-ranked team. His new workplace was the Demon King's castle. His position was staff officer, his profession was Dark Mage, and his goal was to become a hero, leading the monsters. Remy reflected that even if this new path led him to confront his old friend Phoenix, he would not hesitate. Meanwhile, Phoenix was asking everyone if they should proceed with the next raid. As Remy was pondering this, the room suddenly lit up. He asked in astonishment, "Is someone else here?" Lucy apologized for forgetting to mention it, and said she would introduce him to the 4 heavenly kings of the Demon King's castle. She mentioned Furcus and Agurs, making Remy wonder if they were 2 of the 4 heavenly kings. If so, Carmilla was surely one of them too. He tried to remember when they had arrived, then wondered if they had been here from the start without him realizing it. Lucy explained that she thought he would get nervous if too many people were around, so she had arranged things this way. She also mentioned that one of the 4 heavenly kings hadn't appeared, but she assured Remy that this person would support him as a close comrade. Lucy asked if this task would be a simple matter for him. At that moment, Rem wondered if all of this was related to the dark arts. He shared that becoming the ruler of the demons was just another job. The ruler was usually a demon, and the elite group that once led the demons were all skilled warriors and mages with exceptional abilities. These individuals were only recognized when they had enough charisma and prestige, similar to the heroes of mankind. But back then, what mattered most was the ability to use high-level dark arts. Lucy told Remy she would discuss his duties in more detail later. For now, she assigned Carmilla as his assistant. Hearing this, Remy was stunned and quickly asked Lucy to wait a moment. He wondered if it was really okay for Carmilla, one of the 4 heavenly kings, to become his assistant. Lucy explained that the position of staff officer reports directly to the ruler of the demons, so his rank was even higher than that of the 4 heavenly kings. Therefore, Remy had no need to hesitate. Seeing his bewildered expression, Lucy reassured him not to worry, as she believed he could become the world's best leader and easily surpass the 4th-ranked team. Remy wondered if his concern was about the negative opinions directed at him. Just then, a man named Agares came forward, apologizing for his late introduction and sincerely congratulating Remy on his appointment as staff officer. Agares, one of the 4 heavenly kings of the Demon King's castle, introduced himself as the Demon of Time. Remy politely replied that it was a pleasure to meet him. Carmilla stepped forward and admitted she hadn't noticed Agares' presence. Agares angrily denied that he had used any kind of magic on her. Carmilla then asked if Agares had ever doubted Remy's strength. Agares replied that unlike Carmilla, he had never had direct contact with the staff officer. He further explained that the common effects of dark arts like debuffs could only weaken abilities by a few %, while fixed damage only caused minor physical harm. Perception-concealing magic usually had a low success rate and couldn't be maintained for long. Agares also said that even with the effects of dark magic, truly powerful individuals could still defeat Rem single-handedly. Therefore, it was natural to doubt the reports about Remy's abilities. However, the reports from others showed that Remy's abilities far exceeded those of a typical dark mage. Agares asked Carmilla if she had been infatuated with Remy ever since he raided the Demon King's castle. Carmilla blushed, shyly admitting that might be the case, but she wondered why Agares knew her personal business, finding it incredibly strange. From behind, Lucy spoke up and apologized to Carmilla, admitting that she was the one who had told Agares everything. Carmilla turned around angrily, demanding that Lucy explain why she would reveal everything like that. Lucy, panicked and stressed, yelled back that she had already apologized. Agares spoke up, saying that, regardless, the ruler of the demons had accepted Remo, and he would support that decision. He stressed that it would be very disrespectful for Remy to scowl at the ruler of the demons. Remy nervously wondered how a human like him, who had suddenly appeared at the Demon King's castle, been kicked out of his team, and was just a dark mage, had become the superior of the 4 heavenly kings. He also realized that, even so, they treated him very politely and showed respect for the ruler of the demons. Agares continued, saying that being scolded by the ruler was the ultimate reward, but the reverse must never be allowed to happen. Remy grew even more confused, wondering if Agares had just said something bizarre. Lucy shouted, demanding that Agares be quiet, while Carmilla told him to at least avoid causing trouble so he wouldn't get arrested. Agares expressed that it felt foolish to admit he was a guardian of the young, but he believed that innocent beings were precious and he would never harm them. He insisted that true guardians must show loyalty, and asserted that he didn't want to be associated with those who turn angels into tools for their own desires. Carmilla, annoyed, asked Agares why he called himself a guardian, and why he seemed to enjoy being abused, stepped on, and scorned. She also warned Lucy to be careful, stressing that if Agares asked to meet her in unusual places, she should absolutely refuse. Lucy angrily replied that Carmilla shouldn't say such nonsense, firmly stating that she would never agree to such illegal requests. Lucy looked at Agares with fear in her eyes, but Agares told her to stop looking at him with such contempt. He joked, asking Lucy to look at him more intensely instead of with hatred. Carmilla tensely asked Agares if he didn't think he deserved to be arrested. Carmilla reassured Remy that not all monsters were like Agares and told him not to worry. She emphasized that she was, in fact, a true fan of his. Carmilla shared that she would put Remy's posters all over her room, collect his candid photos from the internet, and send messages requesting that he get more screen time. Agares angrily interrupted, asking with exasperation if Carmilla really called that admiration. He asserted that it was nothing short of stalking, no matter how she put it. Reme, looking stressed, cut in and pointed out that he still hadn't been briefed on his specific duties. He asked if he could request more details from the ruler of the demons. Both Carmilla and Agaris quickly apologized to Reme for the interruption. Lucy laughed and remarked that Reme was truly interesting, expressing high hopes for his role as staff officer. But suddenly her tone changed, and she called him Lemachton. Remy asked in confusion, "Lemachton?" Lucy cheerfully confirmed, saying she'd been thinking about the name for a while. She explained that by tradition, the ruler of the demons gives new dungeon names to those who join them. Reme nodded, saying he understood and asked if his name was now Lemachton. Lucy said excitedly that it sounded great and asked if he agreed. She insisted the name was very fitting, especially now that Reme would be leading the monster army. Lucy was confident that everyone else would like the name too. Reme responded with a thank you, sharing that when dungeons became a form of entertainment, many systems were developed and installed to ensure no one was in any real danger. Rules and regulations were also established, including dungeon names, raid log stones, registration cards, mana bodies, and a return function. He explained that if hero teams were expected to play the role of heroes, then monsters were expected to be defeated as beings of darkness. Even if it was all just part of a script, some people adapted this performance from dungeon raids into real life to protect the demi-humans playing evil monsters from being identified. They began using special dungeon outfits and stage names, known as dungeon names. People also got very excited when heroes were defeated or forced to retreat, but it's human nature to always want the hero to win in the end. For example, after someone's favorite adventurer lost to an orc, they might get angry and pick a fight with a completely innocent orc. It's because of situations like these that those who actually participate in raids always face danger. At this point, everyone was sitting around the dining table in silence. Remy looked confusedly at Furcus, who was completely motionless. Seeing this, Carmilla commented that it looked like Furcus was asleep. Remy was shocked by those words and focused on the concept of sleeping inside this body. He realized that with one member asleep and another one absent, the four heavenly kings were far different from what he had imagined. Carmilla asked Rema if they had explained everything sufficiently and if he had any more questions. Rema thought for a moment and realized that with his dungeon name being Lemachton, he needed to make sure his mana body didn't reveal his true identity. Lucy remarked that Rema seemed very bothered by the coincidence of the name, but she was quite pleased with it, so he had no right to object. Rema anxiously told himself that if Lucy said so, he really had no other choice. Carmilla, confused, asked if it wouldn't be a waste for him to put a mask on his avatar. Lucy burst out laughing and retorted, asking if it was such a shame when that face wasn't really something worth showing off. Hearing this, Carmilla angrily asked Lucy what she meant by that. Lucy, frightened, stammered in reply, saying it all depended on the beholder. She cleverly suggested that if Carmilla wanted to, she was more than welcome to see Remy as attractive. Agares shouted at Carmilla, reminding her this was the second time she'd spoken up and that they should be happily following requests from the demon ruler, not the other way around. Remy shared that he hoped they could decide on his avatar together. Deep down, he wondered if he should make his skin a little lighter and change his hairstyle. However, he knew it was illegal to modify himself to the point where his true form was unrecognizable. Some adventurers had succeeded in keeping signs of being demi-human by retaining their ears or tails, despite adding horns or other features. Remy recalled a time Lily had argued with Alvar about whether she should hide her ears. He also shared that elves didn't look much different from humans, and were often considered beautiful, making them a popular race. Over the past few years, the number of elven adventurers had increased significantly. However, Alvar was concerned because there were still audiences who only wanted to watch humans fight. In the end, he and Phoenix sided with Lily, despite the fact that the effects of dark magic didn't manifest immediately. Their style was to conduct quick raids with high attack power, and instead of focusing on support, they usually prioritized direct offensive capabilities. Noticing Remo was lost in thought, Carmilla asked him if something was wrong. Remy replied that it was nothing. Lucy began to explain his duties as a staff officer. Remy nodded, admitting that he actually had no idea what a staff officer was supposed to do. Suddenly, Lucy threw a ring toward Rema and told him to take it. Remy asked what the ring was for, and as he looked at it, he wondered if it was made from an animal bone. Lucy explained that it was a magic tool, allowing him to summon anyone he had a contract with. Reme was still confused about the ring, and was told that magic tools were artifacts imbued with mystical power, created by extinct races. He thought of Alvar's magic sword, certain it was something Alvar had inherited from his father. Lucy explained that if both his mana and the mana of the person he wanted to contract with were channeled into the ring, and they both recited an oath, the contract would be sealed. Lucy called it a simple summoning tool. Remy was surprised and asked if summoning wasn't an incredible ability. Lucy agreed, but reminded him that the ring could only register a maximum of 72 people, and he needed to keep that in mind. She added that Rema would use this ring to summon monsters to repel adventurers, and asked if he could use his dark magic in this way. Remy hesitated, unsure if he was willing to use his dark magic in that manner. He was worried because among the monsters there were also many dark mages, and he had never heard of adventurers changing their profession like that. He realized this could expand his tactics, allowing him to recruit many different individuals to work with him. Remy believed he could become a beacon of hope for many species, even if just a small one. Lucy then explained that, for the time being, she would limit his contracting targets to his subordinates. She stressed that no matter how brilliant a strategy was, if you couldn't build a bond with others, even a talented general couldn't realize their full potential. She gave Remy his first assignment to get to know everyone on a personal level. Carmilla advised Lucy not to be so hasty and told her to calm down. Meanwhile, Remy thought to himself that magic tools were incredibly valuable in this day and age. Even though he was being treated as a staff officer, the reason Lucy gave him such a precious item must have been because he was the student of the Demon King's grandfather. Lucy reiterated that she had great faith in him. Remy thanked her and promised to cherish the ring. Lucy added that she would call it a day, figuring Remy must be tired from processing so much new information. Remy replied that he wasn't tired and thanked Lucy once again. Lucy then announced she would hold a welcome party soon and called for Agares. Agares understood and asked Lucy to leave the venue preparations to him. He promised to book a shop that served all sorts of sweets the demon ruler loved. Agares also expressed his desire for the honor of sitting beside the ruler during the party. Lucy, flustered, immediately refused, saying she wasn't sure what he'd do if she let him. Agares replied dejectedly, stressing that he'd already guaranteed he wouldn't do anything inappropriate. Lucy then acted strangely, commenting on the suspicious look she felt from her loyal followers. Carmilla stepped in and said she would see Remy out. On the way, she mentioned that his registration card would be given to him later, apologizing for the delay. Rem said that it was fine. Carmilla also mentioned that he had witnessed many of her embarrassing moments today. Reme replied that he had never been praised like that before, and it made him genuinely happy. He thanked Carmilla, saying that because of her, he had remembered many things, including why he had once longed to be a hero. Something he had been slowly forgetting recently. Carmilla shared that if Reme didn't find her detestable, she was very happy about that. Deep down, however, Reme still thought Carmilla was a rather strange person. Carmilla then asked if Reme really thought she was a kind person, and she also asked him how far he would put up with her. Reme, confused, asked her what she meant. Carmilla explained, haltingly, that she was asking if she could be his first one. Reme, flustered, quickly told her to wait, wanting to know what she was going to say next. Carmilla, blushing and fumbling, said it was nothing and admitted she hadn't expressed herself clearly. She sincerely apologized for causing a misunderstanding. Then, Carmilla mentioned that the ring Reme received could also record orders. Reme, confused, asked what she meant by orders. Carmilla confirmed and explained that, for example, if Reme made a contract with her, the ring would record that she was his first contract. Similarly, she would also know that she was the first monster he contracted with. Reme replied that he understood. Carmilla repeated that she was truly a fan of Reme's, and that she was the one who had proposed inviting him into the Demon King's army. She added that she was the one who brought him all the way here, and was currently acting as his assistant. Furthermore, she was the one sitting next to him during the entire explanation of his duties. It seemed Carmilla wanted to say something more, but hesitated. Reme thought about Carmilla's power. Although she seemed mischievous, he knew she was a kind person. Despite having just met, Reme realized it must have taken a lot of courage for Carmilla to say these things to him. He understood that if she hadn't found him, he probably wouldn't be here in the Demon King's castle. Reme placed a hand on her shoulder and said that he hoped for the same thing. He asked if she would be willing to be the first monster he made a contract with. Carmilla, blushing with embarrassment, asked if he was sure. Realizing what he was doing, Remy quickly pulled his hand back and apologized. Carmilla then shared that she had personally scouted him for the Demon King's army and was prepared for the possibility of being rejected. But then, with a bashful look, Carmilla whispered that she really wanted to suck it out of him. Hearing that, Remy was shocked and yelled out in surprise, "What?" Carmilla quickly replied that it was nothing. Remy began to wonder if she meant she wanted to suck his blood. He had heard that a vampire's urges could be triggered by other impulses within them. However, he wondered why Carmilla would ask at this moment. He decided to prepare himself and asked if that would be all right. Carmilla said yes, but asked if he was certain, because the first time for anything is always incredibly important. Remy replied that he'd been planning to ask her from the start, so it was perfectly fine. He asked if he understood correctly that the contract would be sealed if they both channeled their mana into the ring and made a verbal vow. Carmilla nodded and asked him for the ring. She placed it in his hand, then gently touched her finger to it and began to recite the vow. Carmilla accepts Remy's request and swears to always be by his side, no matter when or for what reason, even across space itself. Then she kissed the ring, leaving Remy flustered. Carmilla, flustered herself, wondered what she was doing, but she quickly realized this was her way of showing she was the first one to make a contract with him. She blushed and happily said that she had become Remy's first. Carmilla declared that as long as he summoned her, she would go anywhere he wished. Remy asked her not to tease him so much. Carmilla asked innocently with Remy's mana, surely that wouldn't be a problem, right? Remy felt embarrassed hearing that, which made Carmilla apologize and say she was just kidding. Then she asked if it was weird to be hit on by a girl he barely knew. Remy replied that it wasn't, but before he could finish his sentence, Carmilla cut him off and asked another question. Remy just said it was nothing. Carmilla then asked, "It would be too soon for us to meet in your room tonight, wouldn't it?" Remy could only blush at Carmilla's words. Suddenly, she moved closer, making him ask nervously, "What is it?" Carmilla said softly that she hoped he would take good care of her from now on, as a member of the Demon King's castle as his aide, and as the one contracted to him. Remy replied that he felt the same way and hoped she would treat him well too. Carmilla said he could call her Mira, but in formal situations he had to call her by her dungeon name, Carmilla. Remy nodded in agreement. Carmilla then leaned close to his ear, whispering that if he summoned her, she'd be more than happy to come to his room in the middle of the night. Hearing this, Remy was stunned but decided not to misunderstand her intentions. As forward as Carmilla was being, he recognized that they had just signed a contract to become comrades. And his mission as a staff officer had only just begun. Remy felt that he first needed to build relationships with everyone in the Demon King's castle and form contracts with them. Even though this group was diverse, it didn't change his determination. He could only do his best with the same sincerity and dedication that Carmilla had shown. He believed that there would be people watching his progress as he started his new role. The day after the appointment ceremony, it was Remy's first day of work at the Demon King's castle, and he decided to go see Cashew. On his way, he recalled Lucy's words that his job was to get to know everyone. However, he wondered if he could really become familiar with everyone so soon. He quickly pushed aside his doubts, having resolved to become a hero for the monsters, something he couldn't achieve in his previous role. But now, his new dream could become a reality at the Demon King's castle. When he arrived, Remy greeted Blitz and Cashew with a good morning. Cashew cheerfully greeted him back. Blitz thanked Remy for what he did yesterday and commented, "Dark mages are amazing, aren't they?" Remy told Blitz he was the amazing one. Blitz shyly denied it. Remy then asked Blitz not to tell others too much about him, if possible. Blitz replied that he'd figured that out already, and that's why Remy had let him take all the credit before quickly leaving. Blitz assured Remy that both he and Cashew wouldn't tell anyone about it. Cashew enthusiastically shouted that her manager was the one who did everything, and that Remy had nothing to do with it. Seeing this, Remy laughed and thanked Cashew for her cute words. Blitz replied that they were the ones who should be thanking Remy, since it was thanks to him that they sold out of everything. Blitz took out some money and offered it to Remy, saying it was his share. He explained that since Remy had helped so much, it was only natural to show their gratitude. Remy was surprised and initially refused the money, but Blitz insisted and pressed it into his hand. Cashew was surprised by words like gratitude and natural, and then started looking for something. Finding Cashew's actions strange, Remy asked what was going on. Cashew then offered Remy an apple as a symbol of her gratitude. Remy thanked her sincerely, expressing his delight. He added that he wanted to bring some fruit to his new workplace, so he asked Cashew to get him an amount corresponding to the money he had. Cashew happily began picking out fruit for him. Meanwhile, Blitz asked Remy if he had found a new place to work yet. Remy was about to reveal the truth about his job, but before he could, Blitz asked which party he used to belong to. Blitz added that he would add that party to his favorites list so he could follow them anytime. Remy felt stressed and wondered if he should say he didn't have a dungeon tracking account. But even if he did, he couldn't tell Blitz the truth, since he was still gathering comrades and transitioning from an adventurer to a monster. Still, he truly cherished the sentiment. Remy replied to Blitz that things were still temporary, and that he would share more once everything was settled. In the meantime, Cashew sadly presented Remy with a bucket full of misshapen fruits, asking worriedly if he would accept them. Remy reassured Cashew that it was fine, emphasizing that it's what's on the inside that counts and that her fruits were delicious, so there would be no problem at all. Suddenly, Carmilla's voice rang out, and Remy was surprised to see her appear. She walked up to him with a tense look and asked if he was a pervert like Agares, the type who liked to play with small demi-humans. Remy was stunned by Carmilla's question and hastily told her not to get the wrong idea. Carmilla burst out laughing and said she was just teasing him. Then she approached Cashew, knelt down, and greeted the little girl. Cashew returned the greeting, but her eyes were unconsciously glued to Carmilla's chest. Noticing this, Cashew became tense and sad, explaining that she wasn't small and would grow up eventually. Hearing this, Remy wondered if Cashew was talking about her height. Carmilla smiled and told Cashew that although it might be a bit sudden, she had something she wanted to discuss with her. Then Carmilla asked Cashew if she would like to work with them. Hearing this, Remy was completely astonished, because Carmilla was actually offering Cashew the position of his secretary. Carmilla clarified that she meant Cashew would become Remy's exclusive aide. Cashew, focusing on the word exclusive, asked in surprise if she would get paid that much to be Remy's secretary. Blitz also seemed thrilled by the news, thinking it was a wonderful opportunity for Cashew. He also remarked on Remy having such a beautiful friend like Carmilla, expressing his surprise. Carmilla replied by revealing that she and Remy have had a close relationship ever since he helped her. This surprised everyone around them. Remy wondered if Carmilla was referring to the time he joined the Demon King's army. Blitz then asked Carmilla if she was Remy's friend, and said that he was willing to trust her. However, he wanted to know if the job would truly be safe for Cashew. Carmilla assured Blitz that the job would be very safe, but emphasized that the final decision was still up to Cashew. She suggested that Cashew should discuss it with Blitz and her family before making a decision. If Cashew agreed, Carmilla would be happy to personally visit and explain the details to her family. Cashew, nervous and confused, asked why she was chosen. Carmilla apologized and explained that she had overheard the conversation between Cashew and Remy the day before. Carmilla believed that if Cashew worked with them, she could ease her mother's burden more than she currently was. Most importantly, Remy's new job was very stressful, and having a close and excellent assistant would be crucial. Hearing this, Cashew blushed but looked very happy. Blitz was also pleased and said that he wouldn't have to worry at all, as long as Cashew was working with Remy. Cashew shyly asked Remy if it would be a bother for her to become his assistant. Remy was taken aback by the question, but he quickly reassured her, saying he'd be delighted to have her. He emphasized that it was ridiculous to think she'd be any trouble for him. On the contrary, she might even do a better job than expected. Then, Remy began to think more deeply, wondering if it was really okay to bring a young girl like Cashew to the Demon Lord's castle. He explained to Cashew that she would just be a secretary and wouldn't have to participate in defense but would only handle simple administrative tasks. Remy noticed a strange, worried look on Cashew's face, so he quickly reassured her that she didn't have to force herself. Suddenly, Cashew excitedly said that she wanted to do the job. She insisted that she wanted to help and become Remy's secretary. Cashew then turned to ask Blitz if the manager would agree. Blitz happily replied that she could do it and that she was now past the stage of earning pocket money. He promised to fully support her decision. After everything was settled, it was time for them to leave. Blitz told them to wait a moment and started gathering some fruit, saying it was a congratulatory gift for Remy's and Cashew's new jobs. Remy thanked Blitz for the gift, and Carmilla said she would send a subordinate to pick up the gifts later. Blitz readily agreed, and also offered to look after Remy if he ever needed help. Carmilla then told Cashew it was time to leave and to send her regards to her mother. The group went to Cashew's house together, with Carmilla tagging along to greet the family. Remy shared that Cashew's mother ran a second-hand clothing store. In her family, Cashew had an older sister, a younger sister, and a younger brother, but no father. Remy realized clearly that raising 4 children was an immense burden for a single mother. That was precisely why Cashew believed that getting a job would help ease her mother's burden. However, Cashew's mother initially refused to let her work at the Demon Lord's castle, even after learning the salary she would receive. This showed just how much she cared for and worried about her daughter. In the end, the only reason Cashew's mother agreed was because Cashew had insisted on taking the job. Cashew's mother shared with Remy that Cashew had told her about him, saying that he was her very first customer. Hearing this, Remy was surprised to realize Cashew had kept everything a secret. He nodded in confirmation. Cashew's mother then said that although Cashew was inexperienced, she hoped Remy would take good care of her. Remy assured her that he would look after Cashew carefully. Afterward, the group said their goodbyes. On the way, Remy asked Cashew one more time if she was sure about her decision. He also asked Cashew if she was surprised to learn that he wasn't an adventurer, but an employee at the Demon Lord's castle. Cashew cheerfully replied that she wasn't at all, and she even expressed her admiration, saying that him becoming a staff officer was an incredible achievement. Remy was pleased to hear that and thanked Cashew for the compliment. Cashew then shared that she had never explored the path to the Demon Lord's castle before. Suddenly, she saw a butterfly and ran off to play with it. Later, Carmilla noticed Remy looked worried and asked him what was wrong. Remy asked Carmilla since when she had started eavesdropping on their conversation yesterday. With a strange smile, Carmilla replied that she had heard everything from beginning to end. Remy asked if Carmilla had invited Cashew to the Demon Lord's castle just because Cashew was his friend. Carmilla answered that it was one of the reasons, but more importantly, it was because Remy needed an assistant for his role as a staff officer. She added that it was a shame she couldn't always be his assistant. Remy tensely remarked that he still thought of Cashew as just a child. Carmilla placed a hand on Remy's shoulder and called his name. Remy blushed, tensely asking what she meant. Carmilla clarified that she was talking about Remy needing an empathizer, someone who understood and supported him. Remy asked again, flustered, if she had really said empathizer. Carmilla responded with a nod, explaining that even though Remy now understood his true power, he expected too little from others. Therefore, for the time being, both she and Cashew would admire him. Remy was surprised to hear this. Carmilla shared that both she and Cashew knew very well how powerful Remy's heart and magic were. Suddenly, Carmilla became passionate, declaring that Remy was amazing and that she couldn't stand the idea of someone as wonderful as him having to hide without being appreciated, especially since Remy was a fantastic dark magician. Hearing all that, Remy felt uplifted and happily thanked her for the praise. Carmilla then reminded him that although Remy could form contracts with his ring, the monsters were fundamentally under the control of their floor bosses. So, to gain allies, Remy had to get permission from both the monsters and their floor bosses. Carmilla clarified that her subordinates, the Pigas, were completely at Remy's disposal. However, from now on, he needed to gather allies who truly understood him, like Carmilla and Cashew, with whom he could build a circle of trust. Hearing Carmilla's words, Remy began to think about finding allies who would be willing to share their trust and fight alongside him. Remy shared that before their jobs were determined, he was the center of attention among the village children. He had many other friends besides Phoenix, but as soon as their jobs were set, everyone started cursing and mocking him, just because he said he would become a hero but ended up a dark magician. Everyone said there was no benefit to being with a dark magician, and that he would never become a hero. As a result, everyone except for Phoenix abandoned him. However, Phoenix said that they could become the best together, and that they would become the greatest heroes. Remy began to speak to himself, expressing his joy that he could now share with Phoenix that he had new allies. The paths of monsters and adventurers may have diverged for now, but as the staff officer of the Demon Lord's castle, Remy was determined to face Phoenix with all his strength. He decided to gather the ultimate allies, those who believed in each other. The scene shifts to the Demon Lord's castle, where Remy explains that there is a reception desk in the main hall for challengers, and many facilities are located underground, starting from the dungeons. For example, there's a large public bath for employees, a cafeteria, a blacksmith's workshop, and a small theater. Among all these facilities, the place Carmilla took him that day to gather allies was a playground. Carmilla said she wanted him to meet a group of wild wolves. She also mentioned that they would be gathering people of good character, starting with the floor boss, Marcosius. Upon hearing the name, Remy recalled that Marcosius was the one on the 4th floor that his party had fought the other day. He wondered if Marcosius would accept a former adventurer like him after what had happened last time. Remy also wondered about the wild wolves, a race that used both human and half-wolf forms for different purposes. Remy figured that Carmilla must have been confident Marcosius wouldn't give him any trouble. Carmilla was really looking at him from many angles, wasn't she? So he also needed to do his best to get Marcosius to acknowledge him and become his ally. When they arrived at a large stone, Carmilla explained that it was like the raid recording stone, and told them to select the playground, as she would go on ahead. Cashew marveled at the sight of the stone. Remy then asked Cashew if they should go. Cashew said yes, and Remy said he would let his secretary decide where they should go. Upon entering the field, both Cashew and Remy were surprised. Suddenly, Remy saw many wild wolves running with their leader, Marcosius, who ordered them to run faster. Marcosius explained that even if they were hit by a terrible dark magic spell and lost half their speed, they would still be fine if they doubled their natural speed. Carmilla called out Marcosius's name, and he heard her and approached, asking if it was time. When Marcosius arrived, Remy was stunned by his powerful presence and realized what it truly meant to be the boss of the 4th floor. Marcosius stared intently at Remy, making him feel scared. However, to his surprise, Marcosius started to smile and clapped him on the shoulder, saying that he was glad to hear Remy would actually be joining their army. Remy introduced himself as Lemageddon. Marcosius asked if that was the name of Remy's dungeon, then expressed his hope that they would get along well. At that moment, Remy wondered if he was truly welcome and realized that Carmilla must have predicted this would happen. Marcosius even playfully interacted with Cashew, which made Remy feel relieved that Marcosius seemed friendly and kind. Marcosius then shared that he thought Remy and the guy with the phoenix sword were truly amazing. Remy asked if Phoenix was really that strong. Hearing this question, Marcosius became enraged and furiously asked, "What are you talking about?" Cashew got scared and hid behind Remy, who also immediately went on the defensive. Marcosius explained that the reason the fire hero praised them was because a dark magician like Remy was on the expedition team, and he had never seen such perfect magic before. He also asked Remy how much training experience he had accumulated at his age, expressing his admiration for him as a man of honor. Remy noticed that Marcosius had not only carefully analyzed Phoenix, but him as well. He expected nothing less from a dungeon boss. Marcosius then mentioned there was one thing he was very curious about. Remy asked what it was. Marcosius asked why Remy had released the dark magic he had summoned on the fire hero when they confronted each other. Remy replied that during the battle, Phoenix desired a fair one-on-one fight. Marcosius had also agreed to wait for the leader to arrive, as he could have easily defeated everyone, except for Phoenix, if he had attacked them. Remy then asked, with that in mind, wouldn't it have been disrespectful for him to interfere in the fight? Marcosius replied that, as a man of honor, that was a very fair point. But he also asked, what if the fire hero had been defeated? Remy answered that Phoenix would never lose in a one-on-one duel. Therefore, the choice wasn't about winning or losing, but whether he would choose to respect Marcosius's will after having agreed to a one-on-one. Hearing this, Marcosius first stared at Remy, but then suddenly burst out laughing, asking if Remy not only recognized his ally's victory, but also valued the dignity of his enemy. Marcosius then told Remy that, with a few exceptions, defeated monsters cannot appear on other floors, so it would be a problem if Remy summoned them. He asked Remy if he heard correctly that Remy was gathering 72 comrades. Marcosius offered to join Remy's group. He also asked if Remy's plan was to go against the Fire Heroes team, and expressed his desire to challenge them once more. Then, Marcosius told Remy that more than anything else, Remy had made him happy, and he asked if Remy wanted to sign a contract with him. Then, Marcosius transformed into his human form. He held out his hand for a handshake with Remy. Remy replied that he hoped they would get along well. Marcosius laughed, saying that would make Remy and him brothers. He also thanked Carmilla for bringing Reme to him. Marcosius promised that he would answer Reme's every summons and would always be ready to help. He mentioned that he didn't know which floor Reme would be assigned to or how Reme would gather the other comrades, but if Reme wanted, he could use his brothers as well. All the wild wolves shouted in unison in agreement, showing their support for Reme. Seeing this, Reme happily thanked them all. He shared that he would probably be assigned to the 10th floor, which was the final fortress before the 11th floor, where the Demon Lord was located. He knew for sure that Phoenix would come for him. Until that time came, Reme would gather comrades and prepare countermeasures. Then, Marcosius mentioned that in 2 days the fire hero would launch an attack on the 5th floor. Reme replied that they would have a new 5th member with them, so they should carefully observe the fire hero's team's actions and plan accordingly. Reme also mentioned that he would be in the control room to analyze the matches. Marcosius laughed and told Reme that being his enemy might be terrifying, but being his ally was reassuring. He then asked both Reme and Cashew to come back again. Cashew happily replied that she would come back. The scene shifts to 2 days later, as the commentators on the livestream began discussing that the Fire Heroes team had arrived to attack the 5th floor of the Demon King's castle, speculating on what kind of battle the Fire Heroes team would bring. This time, as Phoenix and the others entered the room, several girls greeted them, calling Phoenix Master. This left them surprised and shocked. The scene then shifts to the Demon King's castle control room, where Reme was having trouble completing a task. Reme shared that on the day he met Marcosius, he had also befriended many other monsters, and some of them had signed contracts with him. These allies included the first floor boss, Niberius, the Hellhound, and their subordinates, Glacia Labolas, the Unseen Slaughterer, along with the second floor boss, Chimaris, the Great Spirit Commander, and their assistant, Lerici, the Hunter of Dark Wounds. They were all strong and reliable comrades. Reme also knew that all the monsters in the Demon King's castle were very strong, so he wanted to see how the new Team Phoenix would fight against them. The scene shifts to the 5th floor of the Demon King's castle. Upon seeing the cute girls in front of them, a flustered Alvar asked if this was really the 5th floor of the Demon King's castle. Lily replied that she thought so too. Meanwhile, Phoenix felt something was off. Suddenly, the monster girls started to approach Alvar, asking if his sword was real and if they could touch it. Though nervous at first, Alvar was slowly charmed and replied that yes, he didn't mind. Phoenix was bewildered by Alvar's actions. Suddenly, he saw the floor boss was a succubi and realized it was a charm affecting them. Without wasting any time, Phoenix shouted for everyone to stay calm, but it was too late, as they had all been captivated by the monster girl's charm. Phoenix understood that a succubus's ability was to drain and steal mana. He realized he could resist it as a hero, but it was lethal for others who couldn't.